I'm Tom Dowler for Westbury. Welcome to the latest video all about the Service Management Intelligence Suite for HP Service Manager, and welcome to our new state-of-the-art facility. And yes, I know what you're thinking, it is actually modelled on Wayne & Garth's factory conversion loft style place from Wayne's World 2. Good spot. Now this instalment is all about architecture, and we'll be delving pretty deeply into some of the technical details underpinning both Service Manager and our own SMI Suite. Because it's not always obvious to the casual user why reporting from SM7 is so difficult. So I'm just going to walk you through a few of the key bits of information and show you firstly why the architecture of SM7 is so complicated for reporting, and secondly share a little bit about how SMI Suite makes sense of it all so that you don't have to. Now, some of you will know how frustrating it can be to get data out of Service Manager. Others, you won't have had that particular pleasure just yet. And hopefully by the time I'm done, I'll have convinced you and you can skip over the banging the head against the brick wall stage altogether. So first, let's take a look at how SM7 is set up. Those of you who understand databases and go back a long way with HP will remember that in the service desk world, the database used was relational. What does that mean? Well, if you imagine that your implementation includes information about individual end users, which organization they belong to, what service calls they've originated, and so forth, those pieces of information are all related. So in a relational database like the one used in Service Desk, each piece of information is stored separately. So we have John Doe, who works for Acme and has submitted 3 calls. But each piece of information is related. In a flat database, like the one in Service Manager, everything is flat. So we might get something like this, where certain pieces of information are repeated. In this case, John's name and the fact that he works for Acme. Okay, but what does all this actually mean for reporting out of Service Manager? Well, let's take that last example and extrapolate it a little so it more closely reflects what's actually happening in your implementation. In the flat database I showed you, there was a new row created for each new service call that John Doe logged, but actually SM7 creates a new row every time anything at all changes. And instead of each row including 3 columns, as in our example, each row actually contains a column for every single piece of information that it is possible to record. So to take the example of John's service call, by the time that call is logged and all the details are entered into Service Manager, and that's just logged, not even worked on, just by the time the call is logged, the data looks something like this. Add to this the fact that because the SM database has a free structure, people can create columns and tables pretty much at will. In fact, even if that isn't the intention, simply changing something in the front end of Service Manager makes fundamental changes to the structure of the database. And how do you extract data from something that is constantly changing the way it stores that data? To make things even more complicated, Service Manager uses binary large objects and character large objects to store things like structured arrays and long description fields. Now, structured arrays are particularly fun. They're like buckets of data the Service Manager knows how to interpret because it wrote them to the database in the first place. But to anyone else, they just look like arbitrary strings of data. And annoyingly, from a reporting point of view, some of the most valuable data, like related configuration items for example, is stored in these array fields. So, it's like Service Manager is One-Eyed Willy from the Goonies, and the service management data that you want to report on is his treasure. But rather than just make it easy for you, One-Eyed Willy insists on hiding it and then only giving you an inscrutable map and a coin thing. So you need to get Corey Feldman and the Hobbit guy and the Asian kid from Indiana Jones to help you find it. Just for the record, Service Desk was more like Scrooge McDuck. It just had a big room that you could walk into any time and it was filled with money. So how do you get the data from Service Manager to be able to report on it? In essence, is Corey Feldman available? The answer is yes. SMI Suite will do that for you, and it does it in a number of very clever ways. First of all, there's the ETL component of the SMI Foundation. This ETL layer passes the data from the flat, free-structured SMI database into a fixed relational reporting database. Along the way, those blobs, clobs, and array fields are translated into a human-readable format. Then we apply some data mapping and cleansing tools, which are based on the standard Service Manager configuration, but can also be configured with a drag and drop interface to take care of those custom fields that you might want to add into Service Manager. Taking your data from the Service Manager database, which is optimized for service management, and loading it into a fixed relational database designed specifically for high-performance reporting is very powerful. It means that you can apply standardized reporting universes and use out-of-the-box reports, drastically reducing implementation time. It also means that we can preload those reporting universes with a whole host of calculations to reduce the time you spend on creating reports even further. The universes we use are semantic layers that map the service management terms you're used to, caller email address or configuration item, whatever, to complex SQL queries, calling the data in the reporting database. So you can create a report with no SQL knowledge at all, simply by dragging and dropping. An SMI Suite comes complete with a collection of out-of-the-box reports representing the most common reports that people want to see. What does all this mean? Well, it means that you can be up and running and creating your very own reports in just 10 days. Well, that's it from me for this time. If you'd like to know more about what SMI Suite can do for you, please drop us a line at info@westbury-it.com or visit the website, and I'll see you next time.